Worry about what is inside of your control. In this video, I'm going to explain to you exactly why you should be spending as much of your attention as possible on what is inside of your control, and you should forget about everything outside of your control. Now, the first reason for this is that we're just consuming way too much information right now. The average human is spending 82 hours per week consuming information. 82 hours per week. That is roughly 70% of your waking hours that you're spending consuming information, taking information in. That is absolutely absurd. That is just such an incomprehensible amount of information that we're not able to properly process. We're not able to do anything with it. We just take in all this information because we can. And what happens when you take in all this information, when you have all this external stimulus going on, is that it's pulling your attention in 50 different ways. A lot of us are starting to understand now that our most valuable resource is not necessarily our time, it's actually our attention. Because our attention determines where our focus is, what we're focused on, where we're allocating our most valuable resources. So if you realize that attention is your most valuable resource, then you probably wouldn't have your attention split in 50, in 100, in 1,000 different directions, going all over the place because you're focusing on a political race on the other side of the world, or you're focusing on a war going on thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers away from you, or you're worried about a plane crash that already happened 2 weeks ago that was nowhere near you again, or you're worried about that sports team that did really well. You're focusing on so many things that are completely outside of your control. And what happens is that's just noise. That's just so much noise. That's so much high frequency things going on in your head all the time. If you think about your attention, your mind as like a blank piece of paper, right now, most of us are just grabbing a crayon and just scribbling all over the place. It's just attention's going in 50 different ways. We don't know what's going on. We're just taking in more and more information. We don't know when to stop. We're completely insatiable. Well, what if your mind was like a blank piece of paper and there was one or two goals that you were purely focused on? One or two things that you allocated all of your attention to. You would probably get to those goals much better. You'd probably have a much higher likelihood of achieving them, and you'd probably actually enjoy the process much more, because rather than worrying about all of these things outside of your control, you're purely focusing on what you can control. And when you focus on what you can control, you can change what you control. If you guys are enjoying this, if you would like to learn more, I have a completely free course on how to dopamine detox, how to rewire your brain to love working hard. You can check that out at school.com/modern monk. I'll leave a link in the description below. Otherwise, keep enjoying the video. What happens if we receive all this noise, if we just take in all of this information, all of these things outside of our control? Well, what happens is we actually end up creating a sense of hopelessness. We feel completely hopeless. And why is that? Well, if we allocate 50, 80, 90 for most of us % of our attention to what is outside of our control, that means that what we're worrying about, the things that are going on in our lives, everything that's happening, we have no control over. And if you don't have control, what hope do you have? You're like a ship that's at the whims of the waves. It's just rocking side to side. You're like a falling leaf floating side to side with changes in the wind. You have zero control over your life whatsoever. You're worrying about things that are outside of your control, and that will make you feel hopeless. That will make you feel like, I have no control over any of my outcomes. I have no control over my destiny. And what happens if you feel like you have no control? Well, you take no personal responsibility. You can't take responsibility for anything that's going on in your mind if you can't control it. And if you want to be a person who achieves a lot of things, you need to take as much personal responsibility as possible. And a great way to be able to take on as much of that personal responsibility as possible is to focus on things that you can control, outcomes that you can change, decisions that you can make that are going to impact your life and impact the lives of others. So rather than focusing on that political race happening on the other side of the world, rather than focusing on a war on the other side of the country or on the other side of the planet that you can't control, why don't we start focusing on what can I do? Because if you actually want to make an impact on the global scale, you can do it, but you probably can't do it right now. you probably have to be the person who's able to make an impact on the global scale. You can love Elon Musk or you can hate Elon Musk, but I bet you that Elon Musk wasn't spending a lot of time thinking about politics when he was starting PayPal or when he was starting Tesla, right? He was probably focused 100% of his attention on building companies that are profitable to get him to a position where he's worth hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to where he can actually affect politics. There's no point me sitting in my bedroom and whinging about a political leader or, what this politician's doing when I can't affect any of those outcomes. I'm just complaining, I'm just crying, but I can't affect any of the outcomes. That's going to make me feel absolutely hopeless because I go, wow, I'm really worried about this. If this outcome happens, I'll be really upset, but at the end of the day, I can't do anything about it. I have zero personal responsibility. I'm completely hopeless. So that's why if you worry about things outside of your control, you will end up feeling completely hopeless. And the last thing is, your mood is now being affected in a very real way by things that you can't change. Imagine if I told you, you're going to wake up today and by no fault of your own, you may feel really great or you may feel really terrible. You probably say, I don't want that. I don't want my mood to be dictated by things I can't control. But the reality is that's the case for most of us. For people that are really involved in a sports team, for example, they spend all week, they're really looking forward to the game coming up. And what happens? A bunch of people who don't know their name play a game. You're sitting at home on a couch with another man's name on your back, screaming at pixels on a screen, and an outcome of a game will happen that you have zero control over. And at the end of that game, based on the outcome of that game, you will either be really happy or you will be really sad. Now, you couldn't control the outcome whatsoever. There was no input that you could have to affect any of those results, but your emotions, your emotional state is going to change regardless, purely by the fact that you've allocated so much of your attention, you've worried so much about something that's outside your control. And the same thing with people who are really into politics, they're really into a certain political party, and they wait, let's say you're in the US, you wait 4 years for your election, and you're really excited for your political party to win. And they either win or they lose. If they win, you'll be really happy for a few days, and if they lose, you'll be really sad for a few weeks. And that's it. Nothing else is really going to change. You couldn't change any of those outcomes. But guess what? Let's say you allocated 90% of your attention, 100% of your attention to what's inside your control, and you became the person capable of making changes on a bigger scale, then you could actually influence these things that you say you care about right now. You could actually make an impact. But it's not going to happen by you sitting there and consuming 82 hours of information, 82 hours of things that you can't control per week. So let's dial back on consuming crazy amounts of information, all this stimulus, all these things that we can't control because we're told that we should worry about these or we should care about these. The reality is the only thing that you should really be worrying about, the only thing that you should be caring about is yourself, is what you can control, because the only thing that you can change is yourself, is the things in your control. And if you want to have an impact on other people's lives, if you want to have an impact on a greater scale, you need to fix yourself first. You can't just go out there and change the world from your bedroom when you're overweight, you haven't worked a day in your life, you're just living in your little bubble, just scrolling social media, playing video games. You can't affect anything. So first you need to become the person able to create change, and you do that by focusing internally, improving yourself, improving your character to get to a point where you can make changes on the larger scale. So that is why you should only be worrying about things that are inside of your control. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please subscribe. This is a new channel, so if you want to be an OG, if you want to ride us to the top, then please subscribe. We much appreciate it. Otherwise, I will see you on the next video.